what we're going to start with is a little bit of blanket slash towel folding. So grab your first blanket towel and then open it up to what looks like to be about half the size of your mat, both across and lengthwise, about half. And some of you have done this before, but we're going to do what's called a trifold with the blanket. So if you lay it down on its side, or at least if I lay it down on its side, what I have here is just the main fold of the blanket is facing me, but the multiple edges are facing away from me. So what you want to do is take about 1/3 of that shape, fold it over the top, and then the last third that's left, you fold it under the bottom. And so if you look at the side, it should make a nice zigzag shape. And we're going to set these blankets up in order to open up the chest and help us facilitate a little bit more breathing, a little bit better breathing. Now, if you're using an actual Mexican blanket, you're going to have one end that has these tassels on it. So if you're using that, just make sure where the tassels are, that is not where you're going to place your head. And so you're going to place your first blanket right at the top of the mat. Just make sure where your head's going to be placed is right on the same line as the top edge of your mat. And then you're going to take your second blanket or towel and then start with it in about a 1/3 to 1/4 the size of your mat. And then just basically do the same thing. So again, you lay it down on the side and you do the whole trifold. 1/3 blanket shape goes over the top, last third goes under. And it's nice if you're a little bit more scrupulous and a little bit more tidy about the way that you fold your blankets, because if you create any lumps in it, you're going to feel those lumps when you lay down. And even if you don't feel them subjectively, your body will still be responding to them. And we want to try to avoid that. So we're creating like an even plane, a symmetrical surface on which we place our bodies. So when you get the second trifold, you're going to place that across the top edge of the first blanket. So like you see here, you're basically making a capital letter T. And then the strap or the belt that you're using. And before I lay down and actually show you, or before we all lay down and get into the pose, I just want to show you real quick how we're going to set up the belt so that when you lay down, you don't have to just rely on my words exclusively. You can actually see what happens. So I'm going to have this belt right above the knees. And you want to make sure to never have the belt directly over the kneecaps. Just have like an inch or so above. Make sure the buckle stays in the middle in between your legs. Now, if I push my legs out against the belt, you can see right here, right, that my outer knees are as wide as my outer hips. So just make sure that is the maximum. If you want to tighten your belt tighter so your legs are more narrow than your hips, that's okay. Just make sure that your legs don't do this. So wider than the hips, the width of the hips is not encouraged. So I'm going to show you this just in terms of the legs so that when you actually lay down, it's a little bit easier to interpret. So you're going to straighten your legs, and you see how my legs are now extended. And at the very final point, I'm going to have you kick your heels out. And as you kick your heels forward, I want you to try to push out against the belt. And you're going to try to even lift 1 foot at a time as if you're stepping your heels even wider than the knees. Now, your heels will be able to go a little bit wider than the knees. And so what I want you to keep in mind is the attempt is to anchor the heels as far out to the sides as possible before you relax the legs. So the ideal then, at the end, when your legs are finally relaxed, your toes are going to be in this slightly pigeon-toed position. And if not that, maybe they'll just be neutral. But here, this is what we want to avoid at all costs when we lay down. Okay? So that's why you're going to anchor the heels wider than the knees and wider than the hips. Okay? So to actually get into the full pose, you sit on the edge of your first blanket. Starting with your knees bent, you can hold on to the back of the thighs or the front of the knees, and you're just going to roll yourself back so you can actually feel how you're attaching each vertebra of your spine down to the blanket from the lower to the middle to the top ends until your head makes it to the second blanket. And when your head makes it there, notice if you're actually touching your neck or your neck is touching the blanket. And if it is, then scoot yourself down a little bit so that you can literally slide your hand underneath your neck and see that there's nothing but empty space there. It doesn't need to be a lot of space, but we don't want to actually enclose the back of the neck with any material. The only thing that needs to rest on that second blanket is your skull. Make sure that you're centered as far as your weight distribution from left to right. And if all that seems well and good, then the last point is you just start to walk your legs straighter and straighter and straighter. And just like I showed you a minute ago, you kick your heels out. And as you're kicking your heels out, also push your heels out to the side. So there's like a bi-directional thing. Heels are going away from the body, downwards inferiorly, as well as laterally. And so when you anchor your heels, get your legs straight, then you can just relax everything. The arms can be either in this classical Shavasana position, which I think we all know. And if you want a little bit more access to your chest, if you notice you do have some restriction around like the upper end of your respiratory compartment, you can take your arms straight out to the sides, just like another letter T. Make sure your palms are faced up. Let your shoulders fall down on the back. Let the shoulders fall down to the floor. And then when you close your eyes, you might notice as time goes on, you might notice a couple of little imperfections. And so that's a good sign. You want to actually look out for that. And mostly in a therapeutic context like this, if we exercise even more focus and more accuracy in the way that we set up the first posture, that kind of precision carries over into the rest of our practice, which is great because then it's good now and it's useful later. But you want to start to progressively relax everything after you've gotten your limbs in their proper places. Relax your face by closing your eyes. Relax the forehead. Relax your mouth and throat. And one very simple way we can relax the jaw, the mouth, just the whole territory of what we speak with and what we eat with, is you just separate the bottom row of teeth from the top row of teeth. And you can still do this with your lips closed. And we have our blankets set up, or our towels as the case may be, in this manner right underneath the spine pretty much, so that from the back of the body you have a little bit of force, a little bit of structure expressing your spine towards the front of the body, which is to say it expresses your chest a little bit more out of the body, which for all of us modern humans that find ourselves in sitting sedentary positions so often is definitely going to be useful. We know that our breath is really composed of two ends. We've got the inhale and the exhale. And this setup of the blankets in your body allows you to reflexively err on the side of inhalations because you're really unburdening the anterior part of the body, which when you take a big inhale, your belly should expand, your chest should expand, and they expand anteriorly. So if you liberate that surface of the body, you make the inhale less cumbersome. And just for this last minute, find how heavy you can actually allow your limbs to be. come into awareness of your skin, for example. To see if you can tune in how the skin on your arms feels. How does the skin on your chest feel? And likewise, the skin of your legs. And what does the command or instruction of let your skin become more loose and a little bit more heavy, how does that actually manifest when you hear that and you try to implement it? And the same goes for the whole muscular structure of the body, the 640 some odd muscles that we have. Notice if any of them are still tense, and as you let them soften, you can actually experience their weight a little bit more. So your skin kind of weighs down on the muscles, and the muscles weighs down on your bones. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's about as complete of an instruction as is possible. And what this comes down to is just this whole bigger project of yoga, which is kind of discovering the wisdom of the body, which is not like how many students seem to suppose the whole process of yoga works. It is not so much that we're just learning things that we haven't learned before, that we're like this empty container that's getting filled up with embodied wisdom. What's more the case is that the wisdom is already implicit in you by virtue of the biology that you've inherited that's existed for arguably billions of years. And so we're really rediscovering what it is that makes us tick, both physically, architecturally, mechanically, and eventually, if one chooses to go there, spiritually. Right? And that wisdom is implicit because you don't have to think about breathing. Your breath, your cells work. Everything works in your body without you having to supervise it and hold its hand all along. The analogy of a statue carving is very apropos, which is if you take a rock and you want to make a statue out of it, what you're essentially doing is you're taking away what doesn't belong. You're chipping away the excesses. But the potential form of that statue, that was implicit in the stone all along. And so this kind of wisdom is implicit in us all along. We're becoming what teachers call more intimate with it when we practice. And so this first step in chipping away at the stone and creating a better statue comes in our breath. So if you haven't really experienced what good belly breathing feels like, just take one hand and put it right on your belly. Make sure that your elbow's propped up on the floor so that you don't have to exert any more energy after putting your hand on your belly. And then just let it rest there. Notice as your breath naturally flows in and out, how much or how little your hand elevates when you inhale and descends when you exhale. And when your body's at rest, your breath isn't going to be tremendously deep. And nor should it be, because what you need to stay alive right now, it's not a very big oxygen demand. but we're going to actually begin with 5 deep breaths to try to expand that inhale and exhale dimension to encompass the largest possible volume possible. So this just simply entails a 5-count inhale and a 5-count exhale, where we get to the deepest of the inhales and the deepest of the exhales with each of our counts. And what I like to do is just start us off on the first 3 together, and then you guys will finish off the last 2 on your own. A quick little footnote there is that when I start to count, because I'm not going to be counting fast, don't drag in a fast breath right from the first couple of counts. Take your time as I say 1 and 2 to let your breath kind of adapt to the rate of that texture. And if you need to, by the end of the count, if you need to get a little bit more volume in or out, you can usually make that up in the last count. All right? So start slow and you'll have ability to finish off later. But after the first 1 or 2, you'll be able to have it solid. So again, eyes closed, relax your jaw. Breathe through your nose unless it's blocked or clogged for some reason. Start with a nice deep breath out. Make sure that you can feel how your belly and your hand descend. And then start to inhale for 5, 4, 3. Make sure expand your belly. 2, all the way up to the chest. 1, exhale slow. 5, 4, feel your abdomen moving. 3, 2, all the way to empty. 0, 1, inhale. 5, 4, even flare your nostrils as you do this. 3, 2, all the way to the top. 1, exhale. 5, 4, 3, 2, belly goes all the way down and empty. 1, let's do one more. Inhale. 5, 4, make sure you try to expand the sides of your torso. 3, 2, all the way up. 1, exhale. 5, 4, 3, 2, all the way out. 1, and do the last 2 on your own. If you have your hand on your abdomen, you can feel a little bit better how much your abdomen actually lifts by noticing how much your hand lifts. And if you don't have your hand in your abdomen, then you got to kind of pay a little bit even closer attention. And it really does lie in this ability to start to marry the way that your abdomen expands and contracts with the way that your breath moves. It's marrying these 2 principles or these 2 mechanisms that starts to refurbish, really kind of reformat the physiology of your breath. And when you have your final exhale there completed, you can either leave your hand on the abdomen or place it back to where it was, doesn't matter. But keep your eyes closed, and for just these couple of breaths, just simply notice what you notice. Notice if just those 5 breaths had any effect. Right? Even if it seems insignificant or kind of subtle. Don't be dissuaded by granting whatever differences you feel some significance. Don't be dissuaded just on account of the fact that it seems insignificant. Our body, when you really zoom in on it, it develops in very tiny increments. And so the observation of those increments is really evidence of how this is working for you. So still keeping your eyes closed. When you're ready, you can move your toes and fingers, your ankles and wrists. And then eventually, just heel by heel, foot by foot, start to step your feet back in towards the pelvis, towards the hips. And then you're going to lift your legs off the mat and then just hug your legs into the chest. You can take the belt off. You can get a deeper hug that way. Just put the belt off to the side. And then have your knees, you can have one hand holding each knee. And so when you hug your legs in, it's really like you're just doing child's pose on your back, so that we're not hugging with the legs together right in the front of the torso. You're almost hugging your legs right towards the sides of the torso. And that's important because as you get deeper and deeper into your hip flexion, which is what you're doing with your hips here, the way your hip joint is naturally designed is that you have to kind of angle the movement of your leg more laterally as your hip flexion deepens. Good. Take a couple of deep breaths right into, again, the lowest part of the belly. Now, our understanding and our ability to start to really fill up, immerse the lower belly with more of that respiratory sensation, that's a lot of where the restoration of our breath comes into place. Okay, so then you're going to release your feet back to the mat, and then just lift your hips ever so minimally, enough to just slide the blanket out from underneath the bottom part. And then when you put your pelvis down, you can roll just like half a degree over to the right or left. Take the rest of that blanket out. So all you have left now is the blanket that you had your head on. And you can put the other one off to the side. And from here, before we get up, we're going to go through a couple of hamstring releasing movements. So first is going to be our nerve glide. So you're going to pick up the right leg, interlace your fingers right behind the thigh. You can adjust from there your hands to be closer to the knee or closer to the hip so that your elbows can have the least amount of bend. And that depends on your torso to arm length ratio, of course, but you can either have your hands close to the knee or to the hip so that your elbows aren't bent almost at all. Make sure your thigh stays vertical and keep your fingers clasped rather tightly behind the leg, so it's like you're creating a barricade for the thigh. So from here on out, be observant of your right leg so that the thigh doesn't deviate from this 90-degree angle. Okay, and then we're going to tie some breath into this. So you're going to start with an inhale, and as you exhale, slowly begin to straighten your right leg, but don't exhale too fast. Make sure you leave every part of your leg movement some breath. And when you get to the straightest that you can get right now, inhale, bring your leg back down. Really fill up, open up your abdomen, and as you exhale, re-straighten the leg, kicking the heel right up towards the ceiling. And that's pretty easy enough, right? You inhale, bend the knee, exhale, you straighten the knee. So keep going with that on your own. We'll go through about 10 of these. And if you notice that it's hard to get your leg all the way straight by the end of the exhale, or if you try to straighten it, something actually hurts, then don't straighten it that far. Just go right to the edge of where your most intense form of the flexibility may be. And then you can notice that every time you inhale and every time you exhale again, you can perhaps straighten your knee just an increment further, right? It's not like your leg has to be able to get to all the way fully straight by the time you exhale through these whole 10 repetitions of it. Give your body time to develop in this way. And I think we got like 4 more to go. So inhale, leg down. Exhale, leg up. And every time you get to your exhale, be very certain that your exhale is completed. If you leave any part of your exhale not exhaled, then essentially you're just kind of reserving the stuff that you should be exhaling. And you don't want to reserve that, because the reason that exhale exists is for the reason, especially, of getting rid of waste product. So we can cut down on the overall amount of inflammation, toxicity the body holds on to just by really cleaning up our breath. And let's do this last one. And once your leg gets all the way straight, and even if it's not all the way straight, it's as straight as you can get it, keep the knee straight. And what you did with the knee, now we're going to do with the ankle. All right, so that means you're going to inhale, point your toes, try to curl the toes into the sole of your foot, and exhale, pull your toes back, kick up to the heel instead. So inhale, you plantar flex the foot, curl the toes in. Exhale, you uncurl, flare the toes, kick out through the heel. There we go. And then just keep going with that. Close your eyes. Inhale, point your foot, but keep the knee straight. Exhale, kick out through the heel, pull the toes back towards the body. Now what this is, what we're doing here, this nerve glide, more technically called a neural mobilization, is just a technique by which you get to untether your neural tissue, your nerves, from your muscular tissue. And what happens, not rarely either, for many people, is by having incorrect movement, by incurring an injury, or even just by being sedentary, certain parts of our muscles start to adhere to the nerves that are in that local area. And so when you have the tissues of your muscles and the tissues of your nerves stuck together, every time you move a muscle, you start pulling on nerves. So you kind of get the impression of pain and something dangerous happening, but all that is just muscle tissue holding on to nerves. So a nerve glide allows your nerves to slide freely from within that muscular matrix. And that's kind of like its other street name is a nerve floss. So it should be able to floss and move freely like a string does between your teeth. Okay, let's switch sides. So right leg down, and just get your right leg all the way straight from the start. As you pick up your left leg, again, just repeat the same hand grip. Make sure your thigh is vertical, elbows are as straight as they can get. Press the right heel into the floor as you inhale. And as you exhale, begin to straighten your left leg. And again, don't worry about it if your leg feels like it's miles away from being straight. Yoga is not about stretching, and this is something that I always notice people get too caught up in, that somehow your advancement and your depth, proficiency in yoga has to do with how flexible you are. It has nothing to do with how flexible you are whatsoever. Now, of course, flexibility is a byproduct of yoga, because if you do something over and over again with enough awareness, with enough intelligence, then your body just simply adapts, and one way it adapts is you create more flexibility. Easy as that. But where the actual power and the juice really lie is in your ability to feel your body better. And what comes with it is as you start to rediscover how your body operates, you kind of start to relate to it in a different way, where you see it as something that can actually support you in your life and your endeavors. It's not something that you're just held hostage by. You can actually change your conscious state. You can change your mental state simply by knowing what levers to pull, what buttons to push in the whole musculoskeletal system. Let's do about 2 more of these. And before we go any further, you guys, especially in terms of stretching, when we do these kind of flexibility movements, make sure that the intensity of the stretch never goes beyond about a level 7 on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, now that your knee is straight, keep the knee utterly straight, which comes from the power of your quadriceps. And then you're going to inhale, point your toes, curl the toes into the sole of your foot. Exhale, uncurl the toes, kick out through the heel. Inhale, slowly curl and point your toes. That's plantar flexion. Exhale as you dorsiflex, the heel kicks out, the toes pull back towards the body. Now continue with that about 7 more times on your own. You notice that obviously your ankle, foot, it has a little less area to cover throughout this movement. So that means you're not speeding up your breath. You actually have to slow down your ankle movement So that again, every bit, every little fraction of ankle movement has the coupling of your breath attached to it. And as we do about the next 2 or 3, still keep tabs on your left quadricep, which is keeping the knee straight. Watch your exhales. So this last one, really fill up the abdomen as you point and curl your toes. And as you exhale, slowly pulling the toes back and exposing your heel. Make sure that you don't give up on your breath until the breath is actually completed. Lovely. Good. Now bend the knee. Set both feet flat on the mat. Okay, so we're going to go right into internal rotation, and I'll turn towards the camera for this first one so it's not confusing, just relying on my words. You're going to take your right foot and heel and toe walk it to the right until your right foot is about your shin's length away to the right, away from where it started to the right. Then stop your foot in that position and let your knee lower down towards the mat. And you can place your left ankle on the right knee there. And just let the weight of your left leg encourage the descending of your right leg. And that's really it. And you don't have to push. The only or the most active element of this pose really should just come in the form of keeping your toes active. You know, especially if you notice that there's anything kind of unsavory or unstable in your knees, keep pulling and flaring the toes wider, because when you control your feet communicate so directly, most directly, really, to your knees. And you can offset a lot of knee instability just by simply understanding which foot movement helps you design what kind of a response in the knee joint. And so more than likely, your right knee will feel something odd. And if that's the case, keeping the toes flared and pulled back, if that doesn't quite nail it, while keeping the toes in that position, try to articulate your foot so that it's as if you're turning the sole of your foot up towards the ceiling, or you're turning the sole of your foot down towards the floor. Now, those are two opposite ends of ankle eversion and inversion. And somewhere in between those two extreme ends, if you really do it slowly and you pay attention, you'll feel that's where your knee kind of feels the most solid, safe, and complete. So come to that position with your foot and hold it in place. But what's happening here in the right thigh that we're really interested in is what's called internal rotation. And internal rotation is a big part of lengthening our psoas muscle, right? The famous hip flexor muscle that attaches our entire lumbar spine all the way to the inseam of your upper thighs, so that you see every little bit of movement of your thighs, your hips, has something to do with the place that your psoas hold. Good. Take this last exhale all the way through. And then carefully take your left foot off of the right knee and heel and toe your right foot back to where it started, the same way that you moved it out to the side in the first place. Continuing on to the left foot, heel and toe it off to the left. And again, to say how far basically means when you lower your left thigh down, you should have your left thigh be directly in line to the left side of the torso. And you can tell either by placing your hand or kind of running your hand from the side of your trunk all the way to the thigh, noticing if there's any break in that trajectory, or you could just simply lift your head and look. I'm always in favor of abstaining from using the eyes as much as possible. It's almost like we want to rely on the eyes only after we've sought every other end, every other ability to its end. And there's just so much potency to being able to really feel one's body. This whole concept of proprioception. It's really the ability to sense where your body is in space, and not just where in space, but how it's in space, right? It's like you can tell right now your right thigh, you can tell where it is in space without looking at it, but that's not all there is to it. There's also how is your thigh in that space? Is it active? Is it relaxed? Does it feel any pain? Does it feel any pressure? Does it feel just completely joyful and pleasant? And so all of these characteristics are always being communicated from the body to the nervous system. And it's just the fact that we don't always pay attention, or maybe we're not instructed on how to pay attention a little bit more finely, that we don't notice it. But the information is always there. It's always like right under the surface of our awareness, really waiting to be discovered. And the degree to which we discover it is when we can kind of put our hands on it even more and really optimize how things work. This last breath out, take it all the way to its final end. And then carefully take your right foot off of the left knee, heel and toe your left foot back to center. Okay, and then roll over to your side, and then roll all the way over until you're laying on your abdomen. Okay, so we're gonna just start to kind of decompress the lower back a little bit, starting with your hands, maybe not right underneath the shoulders as you can see, but just slightly forward of the shoulders. And also keep your hands a little bit wider than the shoulders, so you give space to your chest and your ribs to move a little bit better. Okay, you're gonna point your toes, press your toenails into the floor, and you'll notice as you press the tops of your feet, if you do it right, your knees come off the ground. So if your knees are off the ground doing this, you're on the right track. Next part is engage your glutes and press your pubic bone into the floor. Okay. Now what you're going to do is you're going to inhale, lift up just a little bit using your arms. Exhale, come right back down, put your forehead on the mat. Keep your legs strong, keep your glutes engaged as you inhale, maybe even close the eyes. Come up gently, make sure that your glutes are firing the whole time. Exhale, come right back down. And again, inhale, going for 5 more of these. Right as you start to lift off the ground, make sure your arms are working to pull you forward a little bit. Exhale, come right back down. Eyes stay closed. Inhale, press your toenails down, engage the glutes. As you lift, pay attention to your pubic bone. Exhale, come right back down. Last 2 or 3. At the very first sight of your lift, use your arms to try to pull yourself forward off the mat. And exhale, come down. Last one. Inhale. Come all the way up. And again, don't push it. Again, if things start to hurt or you exceed that 7 level of intensity and you're stretching, then don't go that far. But once you're up for this final one, hold it for about 5 more breaths. Keep your eyes closed, keep your jaw unstrained, keep your tongue unstrained. And remember, keep using your hands, not just to push the body vertically. That really isn't as important as pulling your body, let's say, more horizontally. So you're creating length in the spine as a precedent to the actual back bend. One more breath in. And exhale, come all the way down. Good. Let your forehead rest for a moment. Let your heels drop out to the sides. Let your toes turn in. And since your hands are already there, curl your toes, push yourself back into child's pose. And keep your hands well out ahead of you. Keep your thighs separated with the same exact position, basically, that you had in the first leg hug that we did. And you can separate your thighs even a little bit more if your torso can't quite fit in between the legs. So you want to be able to have the side ribs be on the inside seam of your legs. Try to walk your hands further and further from the body. And as you sit in this pose, you can always put something else underneath your head if your head isn't supported on the ground doing this. Try to stick your sitting bones out from this very posture alone. So without really deviating or moving much of anything else, connect to the feeling of your pelvis and articulate it so that it's as if you were trying to point your butt straight up to the ceiling without changing anything else that you're doing currently. Okay, and then walk your hands in slowly towards the knees. And then let's come up on all fours. You're going to step your right foot forward between the hands. Keeping your hands on the ground just for a moment because I see this happen so often. And maybe I'll turn to the front so you can see what I'm talking about a little bit better. What I always see happen is people set up their front leg in a lunge on the same line as the back leg, which is completely unnecessary. It just messes with our balance in a really unnecessary to an unnecessary degree. So keep your right leg, your right heel and knee in line with the right hip, and the same with the left leg, right? So it's like you have lateral stability doing this. Okay, and then come up to an upright posture. So your upright low lunge. And we can start somewhere a little bit more gentle with your left knee below the hip, right ankle below the right knee. Keep both hands on the front thigh. And before we go any further, just make that neurological contact to your left glute, right? You can always just even kind of poke on the side of your glute with your finger and notice if it's engaged. And if it's not, try to really, again, connect to the clench of that muscle. And I have no problem with the word and the concept of clench. Clenching muscles is a good idea. You know, if anything, if people suffer from anything these days, is not clenching their damn muscles enough. So both hands stay on the front thigh, keep that left glute clenched. Take a nice massive inhale, elevate your chest. And as you exhale, just simply lunge forward, which all that really means is you're bringing your left thigh closer to the mat. And then inhale, come right back to the starting position. Exhale, lunge forward again. Keep that left glute clenched. Inhale, come up. If you want to close your eyes and give yourself an even more challenging test, that's fine. Exhale, lunge forward. A lot like the nerve glide we did in the beginning, right? So you inhale, come up. Exhale, lunge forward. Let's do just maybe 3 more. Inhale, come back up. Now, if you can go a little bit deeper or you want to go a little bit deeper, adjust your right foot forward using the toes. And every time you lunge, think of how much closer can I get this left thigh to the mat. Inhale, come up. Exhale, lunge forward. Good, 1 more. Inhale up. Exhale, lunge forward. And then bring your hands down. Step your right leg back. Switch sides, left leg forward. Again, take a moment just to make sure your left leg is in line to the left hip, right is in line with the right. And get that 90-90 angle going in both legs. So front knees above the left ankle, right knees below the right hip. Again, both hands are on the front thigh. And if I didn't kind of make it a point earlier, the reason your arms are here is to keep your torso from folding forward onto the leg. So that, for example, as you lunge forward, if your arms weren't there, you'd be more likely to end up in this position. But that kind of works against the very principle of why we're doing this. So your arms are, again, like a barricade that keeps you away from this thigh. So inhale in the upright position. Exhale, lunge forward. With your back toes, you can keep them curled or pointed. Inhale up. Exhale, lunge forward. But if you're pointing your back toes, make sure you're pressing the toenails into the floor. Inhale up. How's that right glute doing? Right, we want glutes. We want gluten. This is not a gluten-free pose. Inhale up. Exhale, lunge forward. Let's do 3 more. If you want to go a little bit deeper, if you want to at least try, adjust your left foot forward. Exhale, lunge forward. Keep pressing away from your left leg with your arms. Inhale up. Exhale, lunge forward. You guys got it. Last one. Inhale. And exhale to the very, very end of your breath. Keep your right glute with you. And then bring your hands down. Awesome work. Step your right foot forward again. Next part of our lunge breakdown. So you're going to start in the same upright position. So you can even have both hands on your front thigh initially. So that can kind of give you some stability. And then take your arms overhead, interlace your fingers, and then just simply try to find distance. Try to see how far you can take your knuckles, your hands, away from the ground. Keep your left glute engaged. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing, just do it 5 rounds. So with your arms overhead, as you exhale, lunge forward, keeping your left glute engaged, and kind of already reach your arms back. Inhale up. Exhale, lunge forward. Keep the fingertips pressing firmly into the backs of the hands. Inhale up. Exhale, lunge forward. Got it. 2 more. Inhale. Exhale. Last one. Big breath in. Exhale, lunge forward. Good. Hands come down. Now we're not going to change sides. Your left hand is going to be below your left shoulder. Right hand can start right on your right thigh. So you're just pushing down into the right leg, pressing down away from the floor with your left arm, and start to turn your head already as far as you can, as far, of course, as it's safe and not painful, over your right shoulder. And this twist brings up a very important point that's not so easy to describe, so let's see if we can make sense here. As you're turning your head and you're looking back behind you, without actually lifting your chin or dropping the chin, just look down and see where your eyes naturally end up if you just point them straight back behind you. Now, if you glance down from that point and you see, say, the top of your shoulder, then your head's in the right position. But because we have all sorts of compensations that usually play in to different compound movements, it's oftentimes the case that people start to kind of veer forward with their heads, right? So they're not keeping their spine on a straight track, and it's a little bit more like this, right? They're kind of curled in, which means that their right side of the torso, in this case, is shorter than the left. And so if you look down and you see underneath your right arm, or you see your right elbow a little bit more directly, that's kind of a sign that you should pull your head back a little bit more so that your gaze lands on the same plane that your whole spine is on. Inhale, come out of the pose. Let's switch sides. Left foot forward, right knee down. So you get into that 90-90 degree angle with both legs. Take your arms overhead. Interlace your fingers. Now remember, when you lift your arms, because what's a part of your arm? Your shoulders are also part of your arms. So when any part of the arm goes up, it means every part of the arm should go up. So that includes the lift of your shoulder blades. So you get your fingers clasped tight. Take an inhale, engage your right glute. And as you exhale, lunge forward while lifting your shoulders and armpits up towards the ears. Inhale, come back up. Exhale as you lunge forward, watching your right glute. Big inhale. Soften the eyes, soften the eyelids, exhale forward. Last 2. Inhale up. Can you keep your right glute engaged without tensing your tongue? Last one. Good job. Bring your arms down. Right hand stays below the right shoulder, left hand on the left thigh. And so getting into this twist, remember, first thing is turn your head as far as it's safe for you. And then if you look straight back, what plane does your sight, your gaze, land on, right? If where your eyes land is directly behind the body, good work. If where your eyes land is a little bit more to the left of where your body, and especially your spine is, pull your head back and continue turning. And what we have there is when you reinstate the proper etiquette for your neck in terms of rotation, that etiquette, that information, which you're really just importing into the muscles, is relayed to the rest of the spine. So it's not like we can just train the neck in isolation to everything else, because nothing in the body works in isolation to anything else. So when we make our neck a little bit more competent, a little bit more intelligent, other parts of the body benefit. Last 2 breaths. Lovely. Inhale, come right back up, and then bring your left leg down. Now for this, get your couple of blocks ready. And if you don't have blocks, maybe like big books would work. You could have like a little stool or a chair next to you. And I'm just going to turn towards the camera so you can see where we go from there. So what you're going to have happen is you're going to step your right foot forward, your left knee down, and then try to get a nice long lunge going with your hands on the mat. So hands can be on the floor or on blocks already, that doesn't matter. But what I really want your blocks, where I really want them to be, is to the right side of the body. So place both of them in line with your hips. So if you come more upright, look exactly to the side of your right hip. Make sure your blocks are in line with that. Okay, so then you're going to lift your arms up, interlace your fingers, reach up long, and then as you exhale, start to lunge forward. And then keep that forward lunge. Remember, keep your left glute engaged, and then inhale and start to go up and over to your right. So to this whole psoas lengthening project, we add some side bending, which really pulls a little bit more, a little bit better on the psoas. And of course, if you have plenty of this lateral flexion flexibility, you can always move your right leg out to the right, kind of have your toes and your thigh point out into that direction, just to be able to give you some of that stability. Now, if you can go rather far, then take one hand down to those blocks, your right hand, of course, and you can lean into the blocks, maybe to get a little bit even more space on this left sheath of your torso. If 2 blocks seem more than necessary, do 1 block. If you don't even need 1 block, do no blocks. But you want to be able to actually lean into the right hand so you can really start to catapult the way that your left arm bends up and over to the right. Try to keep your elbow more on the straightening path on this left side so that it can really tighten or tone all of the tissues of the left side of the body, because what we're essentially made of is all this connective tissue that's prevalent everywhere. And if you put more of it on this kind of a nice tone length, then you really just affect all of it. Because if you bend your elbow, that pretty much takes your arm out of the picture. Let's take this last breath out. Inhale, come back to center. Nice work. Step your right leg back, left leg forward. Pad your right knee if you need to. Place your blocks over to the left, just like before. Make sure that they're in line with your left hip. Get nice and upright, arms overhead. Interlace your fingers. Remember, keep your right glute engaged and then lunge forward. Once you've gotten to the depth of your lunge, first 3 to 5 breaths, keep both arms overhead. reach up and over to the left. Keep watching your right glute, and if you have a lot of flexibility, just to counterbalance, move your left leg to the left some more. And from here on, bring your hand to the block, or one block, or no blocks. Just make sure, like before, you're leaning into the left arm, which actually takes a lot of burden out of the arms, and you can still keep all of that juicy lengthening continuous on the right side. But remember, your right arm, since it's lifted, lift up your shoulder blade. Imagine this part of your shoulder anatomy, is reaching up into the earlobe. Can you tell which side has a little bit more or less flexibility even? Last breath out. Inhale, come back to center, bring your hands down, and then let's start to kind of wind it down with a little bit more quadricep and psoas length. So you can use a block or two, and what you're going to do is sit on the block with your sit bones. So hero pose, right? You have, as you can see here, you have the block framed right between your ankles. Okay, so all we need that for though is the right side. So that means you're going to lean over to the right, step your left foot down. So it's going to be one-legged hero position. Then lean back onto your hands, keep the fingertips facing forward. Press down with your hands, lift your glutes. And as soon as you lift them, it doesn't have to be a big lift. Try to do the opposite movement of sticking your butt out. Those of you that know the posterior pelvic tilt, simply that. So you try to pull your butt into the body, and when you sit your butt back on the block, try to sit it back on a higher part of it, so like mid-glute somewhere. Notice how that experience is on your right thigh. Look where your right knee is right now with respect to your hip. It should always be on one straight track, one straight line with the right hip. If you feel like you could tolerate a little bit more flexibility, come down to your elbows one by one. And when you get there, you can, again, lift your pelvis, do another posterior tilt, sit a yet higher part of your butt back on the block. And if you're going to stay on the block, and this is kind of the limit of what you can tolerate, stay right here. Just make sure your elbows are pressing down into the floor and you're lifting your chest. If you feel like you want to try to go a little bit further, the next step would entail taking the block out from underneath the glutes and then lowering down all the way to your back. And once you get there, see again if you can take a little gentle lift of your butt, pull it back into the body, and now make contact with the floor on the highest part of your glutes. And when you get here, or wherever you are right now, wherever the limit is, see if you can close your eyes and add pressure to your right shin. Right, so the instruction is really impress your right shin a little bit deeper into the mat. And you might notice that as soon as you even try that, it like really lights up your whole right leg, the whole front of your leg. So if it lights it up to a point that's a little bit excessive and it doesn't allow you to relax your jaw and just kind of stay consistent with your breathing, then just back up on that intensity. So you can learn with certain poses and certain muscle groups, you can really sophisticate this dimmer switch approach that you have to your own muscular control. And so at the end here, we get a little bit more space in our psoas, which we've really been working on pretty much the whole time, other than the nerve glide, as it is known to be one of the primary culprits of common forms of low back pain. Let's take one more big inhale, one last exhale. Now, when you come out, be safe about it. A lot of people hurt themselves coming out of a posture, actually. So keep the right foot rigid, keep the right leg rigid, come up from your back to your elbows, from your elbows to your hands, and from your hands on all fours. And we just stop by this quadruped position to be able to straighten the right leg back, engage the quad a couple times, get the knee re-straightened, because closing the knee that much does cut off circulation to the knee and the thigh a little bit, not in a dangerous way, but in a way where afterwards it's good to re-straighten and get some of that circulation reconstituted. And then we go on to the left side. So block between the ankles again. You sit back, and then you lean over to your left, step your right foot forward, and we begin again. So first point is make sure that your knee is right in line with your hip. Then second point, lean back onto the hands, lift your butt, do that posterior tilt, the butt curl, sit back on the block. Going further, come down to one elbow at a time, and again, lift your butt, do another curl, sit a higher portion of your butt on the block. And if you're still going further, take the block out first, and then carefully lay yourself down. Make sure that your right foot, the leg that's not being imposed upon right now too much, keep that foot a little bit more distant from the right knee. It'll give you the sense of having both maneuverability and like more breathing room, actually. So wherever you are, all of the toenails on the left foot, nail them into the ground. And as well, start to impress the weight of your left shin into the mat. And for these last 5 breaths, you guys, if you still are curious about putting a little bit more length into that whole surface of your hip flexion line, try to still keep curling your butt in. Continuously implementing that posterior tilt will always give you some incremental gains in any of the hardwired sort of congestion that we have in muscles. Last breath out, please. Keeping the foot rigid, keeping your legs strong and active. Come up from your back to your elbows, from your elbows to your hands, and then from your hands to all fours, where you can then straighten your left leg back behind you. Give the knee a couple of clenches, or the quadricep, a couple of clenches and releases. Good. And then we're ready to rest. So that kind of flew by quick. You're going to just lay down on your back, have one blanket to support your head on, and since we have a belt, might as well use it. This time you're going to have the belt over the same part of the legs. The difference is now the knees are going to be touching, and they don't have to be touching together hard, but as long as the knees are more narrow than the width of the hips. That's all that's important. So you're going to lay back, make sure your head is comfortable, make sure only your skull is on the blanket, not your neck. And you're going to leave your feet in this position, which is in like the physical therapy world, medical world, is called hook line position. Which is like, I guess if you look at your body from the side, it's like a hook, but whatever. The important thing is the thighs, the knees stay leaning into each other. And depending on your own hip flexibility, you can try a couple of things just to really find the sweetest spot of what lets your body rest, which is the alternation between having your heels a certain width, so you can try to go wider or more narrow, and then you can try to walk your feet a little bit further from the body or walk them back closer to the body. And just kind of experimenting with those different measurements and positions, you'll find where this is like the most supportive of what you need to rest. It's the most conducive to that like parasympathetic homeostatic state. And when you find the right leg position, Relax your arms to the sides, let your shoulders stay on your back, let your chest be exposed. If you have something with you that you can put over your eyes to be able to block off any light that comes in, that's always a great idea. How long you rest is always going to be up to you. If you have the time for it, the ideal is to stay until it feels like the place you find, the state you find, can stay with you even as you come out of the pose. So it's as if you really want to savor that final place you arrive into the rest of your day or night. Always good practicing with you guys. Thank you for being diligent and remembering what's important. And I'll see you soon. Much love. Namaste.